Hey guys, welcome back to Collider Games. We are talking more Spider-Man, and we are finally getting into our spoiler review. I've got so many people who've played the game and played the game with different perspectives coming in. We've got Eren from the channel Caboose, who has been helping us out. We've got Coy Jandreau from Collider Heroes, and of course you all know Dorian Parks over there.
What up?
So guys, you have all played through Spider-Man and completed, at very least, the main story.
Right.
Yeah. It's amazing. I don't know.
If you could sum it up in one word, go.
I can't use amazing. I just said that. Come back to me, Caboose. You go first.
Spectacular.
Sensational.
Superior.
Ultimate.
Fuck. I'm gonna just stick with amazing. Then.
There you go. Keeping it classic.
$20.99.
Turn off the dark.
It's insane.
Yeah. So, Coy, you are the one who completed this the most recently. And
moments ago.
yeah, so just the raw emotion still hitting you and everything. By the way, guys, if I haven't said this already, I'm just going to make doubly, triply, quadruply sure. Spoilers. Like, spoilers. This is a spoiler review. Spoilers.
Because I'm about to say a big one. They killed Aunt May.
I know,
They
bro.
killed Aunt May.
And
Yeah.
it was a great choice. It
For
showed
sure.
a severance from the canon. It showed a lot of heart. You're invested in the characters enough that it was worth it. It also ties into a lot of comic storylines. They did this thing where her getting sick ties beautifully into Back in Black, which is a great arc where
Yeah.
Kingpin puts her, Spider-Man gets back in the black costume. You don't know if she'll survive. She does in the comics, but she doesn't here. They also did this great thing that mirrors the Straczynski run where you find out that Aunt May knows about Peter. In that case, she found out right before, and then they have the talk. But one of my favorite issues ever is the talk, which is John Romita Jr. drawing a Straczynski comic. I think it's like issue 34, 38. It's in that range in volume 2. And like all of these things, they were almost word perfect, gathering the emotion. And so you feel all of the love and lore from the comics, but you get to experience it through these great voice actors, this animation. And Doc Ock kind of parallels Norman Osborn beautifully.
Yeah.
So the ending of this, and that's not even to mention the symbiote, the
Yeah.
very ending of
bro.
this.
Yeah.
We'll talk
Like,
about that in a
Well,
second.
let's focus on May for a bit, because one of the things that I loved about this, and that, you know, from a video game perspective, in other games, you might have been offered the choice. You might have been offered the choice: do you save May or save the world? You know, Web of Shadows had a lot of
the crux of that game was that you made
choosing, because
choices,
you were being
yeah.
corrupted by the symbiote, so
Yeah.
you're going like back and forth.
Yeah.
And then we've had games like Detroit, we've had games like Life is Strange,
Right.
where the crux of things, and you know, it's a bit of a trend now that we're going into more of these choose your own story games. Dying Light 2 is going to have that, and I'm so happy that they didn't do it in this.
I agree.
Because like one of the things that we said in our regular review, Peter Parker's a better person than I am. Like straight off the bat.
I would
like,
have saved Aunt May. I would have.
yeah.
No, I think, I said that. We said that in our reviews. Like, I felt like a better person coming out of it. Like, after I finished playing that game, I was like, I feel morally feel better about myself after like.
And that's what
being,
Spider-Man's
being
for.
through Peter Parker.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the point. Like, Spider-Man is the best of us. That's why I don't like certain storylines that are sometimes seen as superior. But Spider-Man's the best of us, and I like that you feel the power and responsibility. You feel the weight of being Spider-Man. You're not just like, it's amazing to swing around town and it's so much fun, but you also feel the weight of what it's like to be a hero. And that's so hard to capture in a game, like
It
the
really
narrative
is.
structure.
Yeah.
If there was any interpretation of Spider-Man that can perfectly encapsulate with great power comes great responsibility, it's this game. It's this interpretation.
That's
of
the thing.
Spidey.
And I think that there are plenty of people that are going to get frustrated with the ending, frustrated with some of the things that you had to do as Peter Parker, as Spider-Man. And that is like what you have to come back to is with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
You're not going to like every decision that Peter makes.
But he has to.
That doesn't mean it's not true to the character.
Absolutely.
And so I think that like it takes a moment to, especially if you're not so familiar with the character, sometimes it takes a moment to digest what happened and what we went through. But the way they played it, that scene and just going to black.
Bro, I dead ass. I was like, all right, they're gonna do a fade to black. They're gonna come back. She's gonna be like helping out people again. Like, but no, that beep. I was like, hell no. That killed me.
I just love the
Like,
build up to
she
that
got-
scene too. It's so perfect
Killed her.
because
Killed her,
like
too.
the way that she just says like, take off your mask. I want to see my nephew. Because like right from that
Oh,
moment,
yeah.
like this is it.
He is bad at keeping his secret identity in
he
this.
Is not good at it.
The bold choice of Doc Ock knowing I thought was a great department too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of old Steve Ditko stuff.
Get up on that mic, Coy.
There's some old Steve Ditko stuff where Doc Ock. There's actually one of my favorite issues of the Ditko run is. Spider-Man's got a cold and he's fighting Doc Ock and he gets unmasked, but since he just trounced Peter Parker, he's like, this isn't actually Spider-Man, and he throws him away.
Oh, yeah.
So there's this great issue where Spider-Man's fighting, but since he's so weak, Doc Ock doesn't believe Peter Parker could possibly be Spider-Man. So I love that they kind of subverted that in the game, and there's a lot of stuff where Doc Ock obviously knows he's Peter Parker by the time he takes over his body. And there's that amazing cover, issue 700 as a cover, where it's Doc Ock's face and he's going, Parker. And all of those very beautiful images are reflected in that one moment. The game captures hundreds of comics in this. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and there are so many things that I've heard, and one of the things that I reference a lot when we talk about spoilers is going to be the spoiler cast that Kind of Funny Games did, where they had Brian Intihar on. It got to ask him questions directly, and he answered quite a few of them. And one of the things they were talking about was that Aunt May death. They went back and forth on that. They had versions where she did die, versions where she didn't, and they kept on going back and forth on it for a very long time, and just whether that felt earned or not, and I think it was a great capper to the story.
I think it was too.
I think it really showed. No, you go.
Sorry, I was just gonna say I totally agree because we've always had Peter's motivation to be Uncle Ben's death, and that being him, like his reason for why he does what he does, and I like that. First of all, we know this is an original take on the character because Insomniac really wanted to do something that was new. So with that, having Aunt May's death at the end of the game sets the path for this new Spider-Man and this new franchise of the way his character's motivation is going to be for the rest of the franchise. So I like that. I appreciated that.
Well, and we didn't even really touch on the death of Jefferson Davis. As well.
That's the thing about Spider-Man is death. Mm-hmm. Like George Stacy dies, Gwen Stacy dies, Uncle Ben dies. There's so many characters that he loves that you lose, and that's kind of the character. Is you have to realize that your responsibility. You can't hold it against you. You have to move on. You have to acknowledge that this thing happened and keep going. And I think that's going to be really good with Aunt May because you want to be. It has to be a character you're invested in. And the first game we were invested in Aunt May. So now as we move forward, that was someone important. When George Stacy died in the comics, it was huge. When Gwen Stacy died, it changed comic books. Hard stop. The Silver Age of comics was over. The death of Gwen Stacy ended an age of comic books. Yep. So in this game, having Aunt May, it was so important to have that big of a moment. I'm glad they went for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, so one of the next things that we see, like we can obviously talk about the post-credit scenes and some of the crazy stuff that's going on there. But before we get to that, let's just talk about Doc Ock, because that was one of the biggest things that Insomniac really tried to button up and make sure that no one knew anything about before the game was released. And even for like a good few days after the game had been released, no one was showing images of Doc Ock. No one had seen it. And like when we were doing our press coverage and stuff, anytime anything about Doc Ock came up, they were like, don't talk about that. You can talk about anything that you've seen. Don't talk about Otto. Don't talk about, and that was the other thing. We had not seen Doc Ock. We had seen Otto, and they were like, don't talk about Otto. Don't talk about the fact that he's Peter Parker's mentor. Don't talk about any of that. We want to keep that a special secret, even from the beginning, because when you see Otto Octavius, your initial impression is that he's going to turn into Doc Ock.
Well, especially because they foreshadow it in your first look at him. He has all those cables running behind him. And it's like, at first I was like, wait, okay, right away he's Doc Ock. Like, he's at that point, but like it was just a foreshadow. But I love that that's Peter's mentor in the game, because one of the things that I've been loving a lot about Spider-Man, whether it's on film, comics, games, whatever, is they don't just make the villains like mustache twirling villains that just want to destroy the city. There's always like an emotional core to them. Mm-hmm. And I think every villain except maybe some of the Sinister Six in this game, you can like understand where they're coming from. Martin Lee, you can understand where he's coming from, especially with the whole revelation of what happens with that whole experiment and why he's going after Norman Osborn. And then especially Otto, the whole point of the game is like you watch his descent into madness because of all the things that's going wrong in his life. And it's so perfectly handled and so perfectly written. So I really appreciated that.
I thought it was incredible that they did the power and responsibility thing to another level with him helping create the arms. Like I really enjoyed all the tech you do, which also is a great story element. I really liked when I had to like do like the lineup of the, dissecting the chemicals or like setting up the circuitry. That was a fun little.
My faith because I cannot do math. You remember, we did.
It was fun. I like to mix it up. Like you're swinging through the city, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, math. Like it just. I like the curveball.
I realized I was not good at math.
How cool is that?
Yeah,
like
no,
when you're like in the middle of a game and you're like, oh, I'm doing this,
Yeah.
and then at the end when he's like, you're responsible, you did this. That is such a great Spider-Man trope, and that is something straight out of the comics.
Bro, and I think like another thing, like just Peter Parker, you could really see throughout when Doc Ock was descending, like Peter was trying to do whatever he could to like save him. He's like talking to Mary Jane. He was like I really want to do my hardest to try to save this guy because I think there's still like that like my mentor is still in there.
Right.
Mary
And
Jane's
then there's that moment where almost all of that goes away when Otto says Peter Parker, when Doc Ock says Peter, and he realizes that Otto has known the whole time that he's Spider-Man. And, it could even be, like, depending on how you want to interpret this, he could have figured it out the day he saw Peter with the suit. He could have known before seeing him with the suit. He could have figured it out, only by the time that he had the implants in, the inhibitor. Anywhere in there, we don't know. It doesn't matter because Peter's brain just shuts that part out and says, you are not the person I knew anymore. You are now something I have to defeat.
Right.
And gosh, but it's not in a Batman way of like, oh, I'm just going to beat you to a pulp now. There's still so much raw emotion in it that whole time. Yeah, I thought that was really impressive.
Before we talk about the post-credit scene, because chronologically I have to touch on the final levels with the crazy imagery and the poison from Scorpion. And because if we're going spoilers, I want to talk about.
I love that is basically like a nod to the original Neversoft Spider-Man game.
Yeah,
where you can't swing below the building.
Yeah.
Am I the only one who picks up on that?
Yeah, the mist equaling green.
Exactly.
Yeah. When I was like, oh, I can't touch the ground.
I was to think that Insomniac was thinking that.
I was too busy hating all the Scarecrow levels from Arkham Asylum to think that. But yes, there's definitely some similarity there.
And the Mysterio flavor, like the Scorpion stuff, felt like Mysterio.
That's true.
And the one thing when they assembled the 6 in that first trailer and they didn't have Mysterio in there, I was like, oh, it'd be cool to have some crazy visuals. And then he gets poisoned, and I was like, oh, Mysterio's here. Like it was just so. And if that's the game, the movie with Mysterio can be insane.
Yeah.
Like that gave us.
I can't even wait to see what that's gonna be like. Yeah.
So maybe there's a Mysterio in one of the next games. We'll talk about that in another video. But right now, let's get to some of the post-credit scene stuff because after we see the funeral for Aunt May, we go into the credits. MJ and Peter are back together, and then we get the post-credit scene of Miles and Peter like finding out about each other's powers.
Yeah, my boy Miles, like that whole time, I think I even talked to you about it. I was so excited to play as Miles, and we got like basically his origin story layered throughout the game, and so like it was cool how they tease like this is going to be, we're getting a Miles Morales, and hopefully like they confirm that there's going to be a Spider-Man 2 game like down the road. So hopefully we get to see him suited up. Peter Parker, Mary Jane are off like married or something, not even have to be married, but they're taking a vacation or some shit, and then Miles
he's a
Morales,
legacy character, and they made him a legacy character. That's the thing, is like when everybody's like, bring in Miles, I'm like, you just got Tom Holland. It needs to be, you have to be invested in one for the other to work as well. We've got Miles now, and it was earned.
It was
like
earned,
he wasn't just shoehorned. It wasn't like, hey, there's a kid named Miles bitten by a spider.
What a tall task too from Insomniac, like in terms of writing, to like weave him into the story to the way where it wouldn't feel forced. To where like he works in the way that they put him in the story because of the fact that you have that one mission where we get to meet Jefferson Davis, and he always mentions his son, and my son's such a techie and he's such a big fan of you and stuff. And then like right away you start to get an appreciation for that, and then boom, there's Miles. He's introduced, and it works. It completely works. And then as you get to learn more about his character, and as he goes through his arc with the passing of his father, it works so perfectly, and it feels so earned when he gets bit by that spider, and we're like, oh my God, they're doing it. You know,
and
he's
then,
gonna be Spider-Man.
Another thing is like when Peter Spider-Man taught him how to punch for the like when you got to punch the guy for the first time. I had the biggest smile on my face. I was like, that's my boy.
There's so much growth in this. Like there really is, and that you start to appreciate why this is a long form way of telling a story. Is because if this was a 2-hour movie, we wouldn't have been able to get all of that. There's no way. I mean, I've seen cutscene assemblies that run about 3 hours. But at the same time, you're missing a lot of the story if you just did all the cutscenes. There's a lot of the story that happens within the swinging and within, J. Jonah Jameson on his podcast, stuff like that.
So good.
You couldn't have had all of that in just the cutscenes. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit because there's so many cool things that we haven't been able to talk about that we can finally talk about now. Spoiling stuff. The anti-Ox suit. That's such a beautiful suit. And especially after seeing what the dark suit looks like, seeing those two black suits with large, colorful spiders on them, and seeing, like, just on paper, those two designs are very similar. And then in practice, they look great. And just, what do you think about this as an original suit, Coy, for something...
I love Spider-Man. So anytime there's an original suit, there's a moment of like, this one totally lands for me. It reminds me of the Black Spider-Man suit, which I'm very, very biased towards. I'm a huge fan of the Black Spider-Man suit. It has a lot of the similar lines, but it's more techy, and it also mirrors the Doc Ock colors they use. So that final fight in animatics looks like similar tech being used against each other, which I really enjoy. Marvel does it a lot, like Ironmonger, Iron Man. You have those polars. So I really enjoyed that visual, but I also like that they used line work from the original. Like they used line work from the comics. It's a beautiful combination of nodding towards the comics while appreciating the video game, while appreciating the story, while using what he would use. And it also is not something you will see in the comics because the way it compartmentalizes, the way it moves wouldn't translate in the comics as well. Because if you drew those lines, he would just look like the Destroyer from Thor.
Right.
So, but in motion, it looks great. So I'm a big fan of the suit.
And that's the thing. Like, I think you need to sell those textures. And this is one of the things that they talked about so much with the suits and stuff. They talked about how they wanted every texture to look different so that, like, Spider-Punk looks like he's wearing denim. And then you have, the different composites that build up all the different suits.
The carbon fiber in 2099. I've only pretty much played as Scarlet Spider or Spider-Man 2099. Okay. Those are my boys.
I played as that vintage suit the entire time.
Unlock that.
The vintage,
I just unlocked it.
The vintage suit is so cool, but I can't use it in cutscenes. It breaks the immersion.
No,
too
it
much
does.
For me,
it does.
But I've been using the white suit, the 2099 white version, the all new, all different, because that's like my favorite costume for Spider-Man ever. Like I love that look, and I'm so happy it's in the game. But just going on what you're saying, just about the textures, I love that every suit, like if you go into photo mode and you zoom in on them, just down to the tiniest little texture, they are all different. And I love the attention to detail there.
Spider-Man 2099 has his claws. Because Spider-Man, he climbs via talons. And like in the scenes, you can see the talons. Like when he's swinging, you can see like in paws, you can see he actually has talons. And Leonardi drew Spider-Man, the artist that invented Spider-Man 2099 visually. He drew a very aggressive stance when he swung. And that's a thing. When you swing as 2099, the stance is aggressive and it's a bit more vertical. So he angles himself differently and he aggressively swings. It's fascinating.
So I'm wondering, like how much of that is animation and how much of that is the model? Because one of the things that I felt like I noticed was the proportion difference between 2099 Spider-Man and then the Homecoming Stark suit. Like that felt like a slighter Spider-Man. And it felt like it moved differently, but at the same time, it was also like, this is a smaller model because you've modeled everything thinner, like not as much muscle. So there's little attention to detail all over.
While we're talking about suits, if you want to go see Caboose talk about more suits and power breakdowns, you can go check out our other video where he goes into depth about that. Just had to slap that little plug right there.
Good plug.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you revealed to me that ESU suit of him running around, jeans and an ESU t-shirt and just the mask.
It's like as close as we can get to just Peter Parker, but like they can't do that because then he's just
because then they have to animate a face.
His reactions wouldn't like
doing finger guns and swinging while people just know like, oh hey, there's Spider-Man right there.
I also love the Easter eggs, which I didn't know if we could talk about non-spoilers. So now that we're in spoilers, the setup of the Goblin bombs, the GR27. Now, Green Goblin's first appearance is in Amazing 14, but Green Goblin in the Amazing Spider-Man 27 is called Bring My Goblin Back to Me, or something of that ilk. And it's the first time it's fully the Green Goblin with the like Goblin glider and stuff.
Interesting.
When he's introduced in 14, he's on a broom. So not even kidding. He like throws ghosts and he's not like the Goblin we know.
Right. It's not the same thing.
27, he's more of a gangster and he's assembling a team and he's on his glider. So 27 is considered by some the first full appearance.
Okay.
So 14, and we still don't even know he's Norman until like the early 30s. So 27, in my opinion, is like a very important Green Goblin issue. So I associate GR27 with Green Goblin.
That's interesting.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And while we're on the subject of numbers hidden in the game that mean something that Coy will know about, tell us about the spider that bites.
The spider that bites Miles is screen accurate. That in the Ultimate Spider-Man world, the spider is genetically altered. He's not radioactive. So since he's genetically altered, they have numbers on them. So the spider that bites Miles is directly from the comics. It's 100% canon. That's how it goes down. The storyline's different. The way it bites him is different. But that does set up Jefferson Davis's brother, Eren Davis, who is inspired in the films and played by Mr. Donald Glover, Charles Gambino. Yeah. And I think in another video you'll see here on this very channel when we talk about what might be in future games, I think that moment and Eren Davis and the Prowler are going to come into play. So that bite is huge. That bite is integral.
Okay.
Another plug.
So one more thing that I want to, because Coy, you've played through the story, and you haven't 100%ed the game. Eren and I have. Dorian, how are you?
80.
Okay, you're about 80%. So you guys are about the same.
Yeah.
How have you been doing with the Taskmaster challenges?
Medium to low.
Medium to low.
I haven't gotten a perfect yet. I'm either easier or medium, but considering I hadn't touched a console game since Spider-Man 2 on PS2, I'm proud of just getting through them. When I win, I'm like, that's a perfect to me.
That's me. Have you got any of the birds?
I've gotten 3. Those are the hardest challenge.
Friggin'
Birds are the hardest thing.
Have you fought Taskmaster yet?
Once. And since I know his comic,
so good.
Since I know him from the comic, I know how to beat him.
Oh yeah, okay, there you go.
Which is funny because I know his power set in the comics, so I was like, oh, and how to beat this guy? You got to be the only guy that can beat Taskmaster in the comics is Deadpool, because Deadpool's so erratic you can't mirror his moves. Because Deadpool's crazy, you can't follow him. So Deadpool and Taskmaster train all the time. So I'm like, what would Deadpool do? That's how I beat
There
him.
you go. I think that's
press all the buttons.
It's not a good motto for life. I don't think. So what is going to happen is you're going to fight Taskmaster a second time to actually capture him. And he's going to reference the fact that he is evaluating Spider-Man as an opportunity to recruit him for some big company that could pay him a 6-figure salary.
Okay.
And I'm sure that is going to mean something to...
To me, that sounds like either Roxxon or they do mention, what's his name? Mendel Strom in the game. You know, when you're...
Roxxon gas stations are in the game too. So
Roxxon is definitely a thing.
Roxxon Building is up there.
Mendel Strom is robotics. Mendel Strom is one of the guys that helped design the Goblin tech. Mendel Strom also like keeps coming back in the comics. And he's in the comics right now for the first time in a while, and that's usually a tell that they're experimenting with the character.
Interesting.
In the thing when you're as Mary Jane tracing the facility, when you click through who they're tracing Mendel Strom.
Oh.
So I think that's important. Okay. I think that'll be a thing in a future game. I think Taskmaster might be part of the Kingpin syndicate because Kingpin sometimes hires him, and they reference Fancy Dan on Jonah's radio show.
Oh, yeah.
They reference Fancy Dan, who's one of the Enforcers. The Enforcers are one of the first teams Spider-Man fights in the Ditko era. I think like issue 4. We're talking like 1963. So Taskmaster could tie into
Aaron,
that.
this is the kind of
like deep
knowledge that Coy can drop.
Oh my God.
This is exactly why I was like
right now.
This is why I was Collider Heroes. Like Collider Heroes, I just get to unpack the weird parts of my brain that I don't get to use elsewhere.
Hell yes, man. You're giving me like this newfound appreciation for the game that I didn't have before because I mean I know about the comics, but just like you clearly know like everything.
There's
so aren't you like 39 away now?
I'm 39 issues away from every Spider-Man ever in print. Every title.
There are just long boxes between Coy's ears.
I'm at 17,000 comics.
Oh, my, yeah.
But I think Taskmaster
That's
will be an important
awesome.
thing. Yeah, right. So I think he could be a part of a number of organizations because the organizations against Spider-Man are really common. What I thought was interesting was Sable was used in a way that she's not used in the comics as often. She's usually a mercenary, like a full-blown come in, take care of things, leave, not like a bodyguard. So they use Norman differently, and I think that might tie into Taskmaster as well. I think that's one of the DLCs.
And I do know that one of the things that that affected this game that probably won't affect the next games was the Fox Disney merger. And honestly, like I heard Brian Intihar say this in an interview. It might have kind of been an offhand joke, but it was one of the reasons that he gave for not having Future Foundation suit or Bombastic Bagman. And things like that.
Although
because
Bombastic Bagman, you can do without the whole Fantastic Four reference to it, I feel.
Yeah,
like
I mean, you could have taken off the logo and just had it be the blue.
Yeah.
Yes, but at the same time, I think I would love to
it's
see.
It's essential to have the Fantastic Force symbol.
Yeah.
The lack of Baxter building, I definitely noticed.
Yeah.
I went swinging looking for it.
Yeah.
I would love to, if this merger goes through, if we get a second Spider-Man game, for them to just finally like embrace that side of the Marvel universe again, because like my favorite Spider-Man game before this one was Ultimate Spider-Man, and I love that like you get to interact with the Human Torch, and there's all those little crazy references in that game because it's just they never cared about that stuff.
There's
back
some
then.
gorgeous stuff, the little one-liners and things like that came out of Marvel Ultimate Alliance and Ultimate Alliance 2.
Yeah.
That kind of interaction that you just can't get without having
the Spider-Man 2
the
moment.
X-Men and the Fantastic Four.
The Spider-Man 2 Easter egg.
The Spider-Man 2 Easter egg. You guys
so
talk about
good.
that yet?
So
No.
good. At the train when you're fighting Mr. Negative.
Oh,
and
yeah.
R2, L2, and he's like,
So
damn, that worked
good.
last time. It's referencing
So
Spider-Man
good.
2 when he does the train and he slow stops it. So he straight up references Spider-Man 2 in canon.
I hope that means that we're going to get the Raimi suit at some point as DLC because that suit is so cool and it would look so good in this game.
So they have talked about having, we do get some DLC coming out this year. They have talked about at least 3 suits.
Well, the first one will have 3, so I'm assuming.
Oh, the first one will have 3, so maybe 9 total.
Maybe.
So we'll talk about that in another video once we get into our predictions of what's going to come up.
Yeah.
You'll see that in another video. But right now, I don't want to get away from the fact that we haven't talked about the last post-credits scene yet, which was Norman Osborn going into his secret room with this like blast-shielded Bacta tank. And revealing Harry Osborn suspended in green goo, surrounded by black goo,
That's
and
a symbiote.
It's a symbiote.
It's a symbiote.
It's a symbiote, right?
Sure.
Like that's all that's gonna be.
And I think it's the ultimate comics version of the symbiote, where it was
Curse
like
cancer.
created in a lab, rather than coming from space or anything. And my assumption is they could, because of that, because it was created in the lab, because they know what it's capable of, they're using whatever that green goo is to make it so that the symbiote doesn't fully bond with Harry, because they know the repercussions of that. But it's bonded with Harry to the point where it looks like it's slowing down the process of that illness in the time that they can hopefully find a full-on cure. But it looks like at the end of that post-credit scene, when that symbiote hand reaches out,
a
like
little bit.
Harry's bonding with it, and he's getting control of it, or it's getting control of him. And I mean, Harry, Venom?
So I don't want to get too much into predictions yet.
Yeah, I know.
We'll talk about that another. But just your impression on this direction with all of that.
Baby rant. Okay, so clearly Spider-Man has been in the game for 8 years because you see that Uncle Ben's Tombstone's 2010, so he's in Spider-Man for 8 years, 2018. She dies in 2018, 8 years of Spider-Man. I think Venom's already been introduced in canon. We'll see flashbacks. He's already experienced that he's been Venom.
Interesting.
I think part of it's all going to tie into Norman chasing Spider-Man. I think Norman might even know Peter's Spider-Man. That's a leap. That's my 2% chance, but that could tie into the hatred. That could tie into all this other stuff.
Yeah.
That could all be a thing.
That could fuel Green Goblin.
Exactly. So Red Goblin in the comics right now is a new character. There's a lot of backstory with Norman Osborn, a lot of backstory with Green Goblin. What happened is basically Green Goblin's been the Green Goblin. He's been Norman Osborn. He's been the head of Thunderbolts. He's been a good guy. He's been a bad guy. He's been a pseudo president. But after 40 years of lore, basically 50 years of Norman Osborn, there is a thing where Norman Osborn's face got trashed. His face is completely mangled. He's getting a lot of surgery, all this other stuff. And he's been cured of the Green Goblin serum, so it doesn't work on him.
Okay.
Oh.
So he can't become the Green Goblin, and he can't be as crazy as he was because he talks to himself and he's all detached. He wants to go nuts again, and he can't. He's chasing it. So Green Goblin is trying to snap and lose his mind again
really
and become the
interesting.
Green Goblin. It's a great run. It's actually some of my favorite Dan Slott stuff. So he finally loses his mind, and Carnage bonds with him. So now so now he's both the Green Goblin with Carnage. So you see the Green Goblin, but he's got a tail and he's a red goblin and he's also into madness.
Awesome.
It is metal. So it is this really cool storyline that is really current in the comics. Now, what's interesting about this game is Mr. Negative is not as big of a character in Spider-Man lore. He's a Dan Slott character that was only introduced like 6 years ago.
He's relatively new, yeah.
He's relatively new, but he's Dan Slott-tastic. The Feast Foundation is really important. Aunt May and that place is really important. All that ties into Dan Slott. Dan Slott invented the Red Goblin. I think that the symbiote being bonded to the Green Goblin might tie into the Slott run because that would make sense for this canon. And that might be a different symbiote than Venom. That way we can play the Venom lore separately in another game, because if someone gets a Venom symbiote, then every fan's gonna be like, that's not the thing, and that will be like, it's a thing. Like, Venom's very important to the lore. So I love your ultimate idea. I think it might be ultimate, but like adjacent. I think it could be the Venom suit, but a symbiote design.
That's fair.
Well, and it has been confirmed, although this is probably like a little bit of a no duh. But it was confirmed that like Dan Slott was at Insomniac occasionally
He was
for part of the development.
Yeah. And I mean, another thing to point out as well, I'm blanking here, about the whole symbiote thing is that, like, so the interesting thing is because Eddie Brock does exist in this universe.
Yes.
And
we saw him on the card.
There's a collectible that you get in the game where it's when Peter's leaving the Daily Bugle and someone who signs the card is Eddie Brock. So, like, to what you're saying, is there that pre-existing story with Venom, and is Eddie Brock?
Because if you got 8
involved
years,
in that?
you're gonna have flashbacks.
There's a lot that could be there. Yeah.
We did talk about the fact that Mysterio exists in the universe, because in some of the stuff that you pick up in the backpacks, you can pick up a broken piece of the helmet.
Also, someone's dressed as Mysterio at that Halloween party.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's right. Oh, my Lizard
Yeah,
too.
the Lizard and they're the Ditko version. So you see Electro, Lizard.
Can we stop for a second and talk about that Halloween party?
Amazing.
Because that was another thing that we weren't allowed to talk about.
Also, do you think that everyone walking around in hockey jerseys at that Halloween party and everywhere else, they were orange and blue? Is that a Kevin Smith nod?
That could be.
Is that for Kevin Smith? Because Kevin Smith wears an orange and blue jersey.
Yeah, he does.
Okay, cool. I just want that was at the Halloween party.
I didn't even notice that.
That orange and blue jersey does occasionally say Fat Man on Batman, so maybe not. But like I think that would be a great nod. Like there are a bunch of little nods to things. So,
Classic Rhino.
Oh, that was so good.
Awesome.
I love that.
I saw one of the things where someone had pointed out that the Ghostbusters firehouse is in the game, and there's a tiny little ghost drawn on the back of the building. To the point the creative director didn't even know that was in there. It was just one of the animators.
It's like,
just
my favorite cover is Amazing Spider-Man number 33. It's my favorite cover of all time.
Okay.
It is Spider-Man holding up the weight of effectively the world, but it's an entire train station on his shoulders. They referenced it in Homecoming when he lifts and his face in the reflection.
Yeah. In
The moment in the opening of the game where you first do the square is the first
couple
time
hours.
Yeah. So they freeze frame on the cover Amazing 33. It's Steve Ditko's last issue.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a powerful moment in comics, and they made that a frame.
They just pull reference after reference, and not just the Marvel Universe, but they had little references to gaming in there. They had the characters from, I think it was Grand Theft Auto, like Vice City or something like that.
Nico and Roman. Yeah. Insomniac's. There's an Insomniac Games building in the game,
that's
or not a building, but like there's like when you're swinging through the city, there's a place you can stop, and it's like Insomniac HQ or something. In
the auction house that you're at in early mission with MJ is called Roseman's. Reference to Bill Roseman, who is the creative director at Marvel Games. Yep. There's so much to unpack, and there has to be in a world like this. Like we went through and we saw some of the Hell's Kitchen stuff and things like that. But guys, just
I love to. Sorry to cut you off, but the Wall Street Bull is actually.
Yes.
They couldn't get the rights to the Wall Street Bull.
Lockjaw from the
so they had Lockjaw instead.
That's awesome.
But so guys, you've now played through the game. You're able to talk about it freely and openly, as long as you say the word spoiler and wait 5 seconds. What do you think of the game?
I mean, I think honestly, it's the ultimate interpretation that we've ever gotten of Spider-Man, in my opinion, ever. Like I was speaking to you off camera about Yuri's portrayal as Peter Parker and Spider-Man in this game, and now when I read Spider-Man comics going forward, his voice is the voice that I hear in my head when I read those lines of dialogue. The same way that Kevin Conroy's Batman voice is the voice I hear in my head when I read Batman comics. And I just think this was such a perfect story. Insomniac did such a good job, especially taking this from the standpoint that he's an established Spider-Man and just running with that. So he already has his universe established. All these villains already existed, and they did such a perfect job with that. At the same time, still introducing new things and, you know, pre-existing things, but in their own way, like what they did with Miles or like what they did with Otto Octavius. And it's perfect. Honestly, it is such a good Spider-Man story. And 10 years from now, when we talk about like the really good interpretations of Spider-Man, this will 100% be in the conversation.
Yeah.
Completely agree. I, as a diehard, lifelong Spider-Man fan, this got me back into gaming. I bought a PS4 for this game, and I have no regrets. It literally was the Spider-Man that I considered Spider-Man. So it's a combination of the fun of Ultimate, the depth of Straczynski, plus the nuance of the Ditko Stan Lee run, plus the hokiness of the stuff in the 70s, plus the style of John Romita Sr., plus the darkness of John Romita Jr. It is so much of the comics I love mixed into one amazing package, and it changed canon in ways that I respect. It respected my stuff while keeping me surprised. That is really hard to do for a comic nerd. To have changes that I'm not offended by, but I understand the story structure, and to stay surprised. As I was playing the game, I wasn't like cutting and pasting from memory. Right. I was getting to experience new things, but then it'd be like Easter egg for me to know that that's a thing. So it really told a very loyal story. I liked that it jumped us 8 years in, and I also liked that the whole time it made me feel like I was Spider-Man. When you read a comic, you're watching a story be unfolding. Right. When you're watching a movie, you're experiencing actors experiencing the story. If they're good actors, you feel like you're with them, like you're watching them, you're next to them. Right. If they're the best, you're like, I feel for you. This game made me not feel like I was watching. It made me feel like I was Spider-Man, and that is a thing that only the video game media can do, in my opinion. Sometimes you're reading a really good book, you're there, but that's not the same. This made me feel like I was Spider-Man from the first web swing, from the first fight, from the first villain, and I will forever be grateful for Insomniac Games for getting me back into gaming, for this game making me realize, hey, if you guys like Spider-Man, this is the thing I'm going to point you towards. This is the bar. Yeah. Because this and Ultimate Spider-Man, the Bendis Ultimate Spider-Man that started in 2000, and this are now going to be the things that I go, this is why I like Spider-Man. Yep. Spend some hours here. Yep. And there's no better compliment than like I have been reading Spider-Man since I could read, and this is the thing that is a standard. So I loved it beyond all measure.
I don't even want to
Dorian, follow up.
I think that's the ultimate compliment.
No, seriously though, like y'all heard my review, and I think I've told y'all this off camera. Like they captured Peter Parker / Spider-Man within the first 5 or 10 minutes, and you knew like from then like this is going to be like something you're going to get invested into. Like, and I've never like been like so emotionally attached to a video game character's story arc, and then like when you're swinging to go to a mission or something like that, and you see those red pop-ups and there's villains and stuff, and like you feel morally obligated to go beat those.
There's so as you're saying that, I just realized there's actual more than just the incentive of being a good person to get that. Did any of you run into the fact that if you swing past enough of those crimes and don't interfere, eventually someone gets on the podcast with J. Jonah Jameson and says, hey, Spider-Man just swung past this crime that was being committed.
Wow, bro. See, I didn't even know that because I'm such a good person.
I always stopped enough.
I always felt like morally obligated to stop, but overall, like this was just like you said, this is like a love letter to Spider-Man fans in general. And I really think they need to get whoever wrote the writers for this game, please get them involved in the Sony Spider-Verse universe y'all are trying to do in the big screen, because they really know the villains. They get it. Yeah. They get it. So give them the opportunity to like really show what they got, because this game just felt like you said, like a goddamn movie. Like you're a part of a movie and you're watching this story unfold and this universe unfold. So show love to those writers, because they really knocked it out of the park in this game. And thank you, Insomniac Games, for delivering just such an incredible game overall.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. It was a really treat to have Eren and Coy in here. Dorian and I have, given our thoughts on Spider-Man time and time again. We did a Twitch stream. We did early reviews. We did our review. We released a bunch of videos. we've got one more video that we are going to record for you guys, so stay tuned for that. That is going to be our predictions on what is going to happen in the next game, what's going to happen in the DLC, what these post-credit scenes mean for the future of this, and what is gonna happen, guys. Stay tuned. Check out more here on Collider Games.